My name is Daniel Siletti, and this is What's Going On. Welcome again to the show, everybody. My name is Daniel Siletti, and I am very happy to have here Abe Osheyack of Keene State College, and that is where we are broadcasting from today because I am now a student here in lovely Keene, New Hampshire. So, Abe, thank you so much for joining us.
Daniel, my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
So, we first met actually in a television production class that I'm taking here.
Yep.
And you come in and you work a lot with the sports people that guest star on the show that we do.
Mm-hmm.
So you must have some connection to sports. So what is it you do here?
Sure, yep. I work in the athletic department here at Keene State. My official title is way too long. Assistant Athletic Director for Sports Information, Compliance, and Operations. But Assistant Athletic Director is just fine with me. So I'm kind of responsible, directly or indirectly, for almost everything we do, except maybe how we spend our money. Right? We have somebody else who controls the funds. But the compliance side is, certifying the student athlete eligibility, monitoring their full-time enrollment status, completing any transfer paperwork that may need to be done when student athletes who come here from another school want to compete in intercollegiate athletics. The operational side of things is kind of a catch-all position. It's not, I wouldn't want to determine it or define it in a real strict way. I just kind of do things that need done. So for example, one of the clasps on a grommet at the turf field broke. I just put it in maintenance order to take care of it. Mm-hmm. That kind of thing. And then the sports information thing, which is probably the closest way I'm connected to the Inside Owl Athletics TV show, which is the program that your class produces. That's the kind of publicity aspect for the department. So everything from the managing of our website, the keeping statistics of our game, and some of the management of those games, filming videos, social media, graphic design. I or the people who work for me take care of all of that.
Awesome. And so you do a lot with the sports team. And is that what you wanted to do when you saw like Keene State? You said, I want to go directly to sports, or since you are involved with the television production, did you want to maybe shift gears and go to that instead?
It's an interesting question. I studied here. I was a journalism major here, and so I graduated in 2006. I graduated high school in 2001. So we were hitting the time right when the internet was becoming more and more pervasive, and the media industry, especially the print media industry, didn't really know what they were doing with it yet. I actually wanted to be a sports writer as a kid. I grew up next to Dartmouth College, which is not a huge metropolitan area, but it's not a tiny little hick town either. And so I went to Dartmouth sports games all the time. I used to be a paper delivery boy. I would cut out picture clippings from the paper of local games, Celtics games, Red Sox games. I would read the New York Times and Washington Post Sunday editions. I wanted to be a sports writer. And then I graduated college, and newspapers weren't like a real thing anymore. Right. Which is not to say they don't hold value or they don't exist or anything like that, but it's not a job where you're going to really make money and be able to support a family. And I wouldn't say I was at a crossroads, but I realized I had to kind of figure out something else if I was going to make more than about $30,000 a year. And I worked in the sports information office here all through my time at Keene State. I was fortunate enough to get an internship at Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University, which is in Daytona Beach, Florida, right out of college. I lived in Florida for 3 years. And then in 2010, I moved back to New England. I got the sports information director job at Smith College, which is down in Northampton, Mass. And then in December of 2013, the job at Keene State came open. I applied, I interviewed, and in late January, I actually remember the exact day I started, January 27th, because that's my father's birthday.
Oh, nice.
So my first day here was his 57th birthday, I think. Wow. If I do the math correctly on that. And I have been here almost 5 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing. So Well, and you mentioned Florida in there. So I mean, like when you went to Florida, did you feel like saying, "Oh yeah, this is nice. I can get used to this"? Because I mean, probably when everybody goes there, they say, "Oh yeah, I can get used to this."
Sure. I mean, the weather is certainly nicer in Florida, kind of year-round, than we're used to in New England. And just for context's sake, I grew up in New England. I have, other than my about 4 years of my life living in Florida, Maryland, and Kansas, I've never not lived in New England, and I'm 35 years old, so that's a significant in my life. I had never been further west than Dallas, Texas, so I'm somewhat sheltered in that way. But to answer your original question, when I first moved there, I was miserable. I hated it. I had no car. I was making $11,000 a year. I had no social life. I had no money to have a social life. And so, and for someone who, as I said, grew up in New England and was not necessarily exposed to a lot of different other parts of the country, other ways of living, I was very much in culture shock. And so what actually happened to me, so this was an internship for the 2006-07 year, the year after I graduated college. I knew it was a temporary position. But the next job, and so as I approached the end of that, I was applying for other jobs, and the first job I got offered was actually back in Florida. So I moved back in with my parents for like a month before I got this more permanent job. And I didn't really want to live in Florida again, but at least I thought, well, I've lived there before, I'm comfortable with it. This is a job that will, have some benefits, and this is all, of course, like pre-Obamacare. So I was not on my parents' health insurance anymore or anything like that. So I just took it, and for 2 more years, and so I started to like it more once I was able to not that I was making a ton of money, but you're able to go out and do things and develop a social life. And the second job was in the South Florida area, and I don't know how much you know about Florida, but being able to be closer to Miami, closer to Fort Lauderdale, where it's a little more like bigger and engaging, whereas Daytona Beach, you have the racetrack, you have Bike Week, and there's really not a whole lot else going on. Whereas, you have the Cuban culture in Miami, you have all the different things that go on at the Fort Lauderdale airport and all that type of stuff. So I enjoy being in South Florida a lot more than I like Central Florida, is I guess the way I would put that.
Well, I would love to go to Florida someday, just to say I've been.
Sure.
Because I'm one of those guys who's I'm a big sucker for theme parks.
Oh, sure.
So I mean, if you're watching Disney Corporation and Universal, let me know, and I will gladly do some interviews down there for you. Yes.
I have been back to Florida a couple times since permanently moving out of there, and we always, my wife, she was my girlfriend at the time, would go to Universal, something like that. That's always fun.
Oh yeah. Absolutely. So right now we're into fall right now, and so what big sports at Keene State are going on right now? Is there any one that's particularly focused on, or is it multiple ones?
So our 6 sports in the fall are men's and women's soccer, field hockey, volleyball, men's and women's cross country. I think I just counted, well, maybe I counted out 7, but there are only 6 sports. Our winter sports are just beginning their practice, or they will. There's very defined spaces where teams are allowed to practice within NCAA rules, and that's another thing I have to monitor. So those are the 6 sports we have going on right now. Field hockey is probably our most successful traditional fall sport in recent years. They've won the last 5 Little East Conference championships. Wow. Men's soccer has had kind of a tougher time of things lately, but they seem to be having a pretty good year right now. They've won 3 straight games. And then, cross country, I think we might have the best runner in the Little East Conference, a junior from Connecticut named Lauren Perkowski. Their last race, which was not last weekend, but the week before, she was 9th out of 318 runners. Oh, wow. And of all the runners from our league that entered that race, she was the fastest one. So we've got some good things going on in the fall. And then, of course, winter brings on basketball season, where I think we're going to have one of the best basketball teams in the country, not just in New England. So I'm looking forward to that.
My basketball career goes as far as playing with Bugs Bunny and Michael Jordan. So
well, they're remaking Space Jam with LeBron James.
I heard that. So I mean,
I'm excited to see that.
I'm excited to see that too. And with all the sports that you help coordinate, and then like I said, you also help out with the Inside Out Athletics TV program here. Do you have to actually send all the information to them, like all the names and all the scores of the games and stuff like that?
I do have one full-time assistant. His name is Ken Swain, and we kind of split the load of the sports fairly evenly, I would say. Our peak times are in the fall and the spring. Winter is a little slower for us because we do have indoor track and field and we do have swimming and diving, but we don't really have facilities to support the competition of those teams. So those teams are constantly on the road. So in wintertime, our primary sport is basketball, in terms of home competition and the operation of those games. So our roles change a little bit in the wintertime, and where I can become a little more operational and he can become a little more sports information. But in terms of, so to answer your question, it's kind of always a year-long process. It's a cycle that always begins like in the middle of June. Then the academic year starts, and as the teams slowly begin and then end their season, and we slowly shut everything down in May, and then about a month later we start it all over again. Every year, every athlete needs to get recertified as eligible. They need to have a new physical on file. They need to have updated copies of their immunization. So you're asking about sending out paperwork.
Yeah,
yes, I have to send
a lot of paperwork.
I have to. So we have about roughly 350 student athletes here.
Wow.
About 10% of the entire campus is a student athlete. So yes, every year, every summer, and even starting into the fall, I send them all their paperwork and have to make sure they're certified. It's not just me; it's the athletic trainers, it's my assistant. I get help from the athletic director, but I do find myself as the point person for a lot of that.
Right. Wow. I mean, I certainly I did a little bit of track in high school, and that was the extent of my sports career. And I did some, everybody does Little League, I'm sure, when they're little, so I did that too. But I mean, is it, for anybody out there who wants to join a team, not saying that I would, but is it too late to ever sign up for a sport?
Well, it's not about signing up. That, I think, is probably the biggest delineation I could make between what we consider varsity athletics here and what club and intramural sports provide as an experience for students. Almost all our teams kind of split their season into what's called a traditional and non-traditional season. And so for the fall sports, the traditional season is in the fall and the non-traditional is in the spring. And for the spring sports, that's reversed. So the non-traditional is in the fall right now, and the traditional season is in the spring. So they use that period for both those times as like a tryout period. But so to answer your question, yes, you could still try out for a sport if you wanted to. I don't know if a fall sport coach would necessarily be interested right now because they're a third to a halfway through their season. But as long as you were cleared through the trainers, cleared eligibility-wise, the opportunity to try out would be there.
Right.
Doesn't guarantee you a spot on the team, but we're a Division III school. We don't award athletic scholarships. The philosophy behind NCAA Division III is an opportunity for everyone, and so at least theoretically, those opportunities are there. Yep.
Right. And so, with all this stuff that we've talked about, do you think you're gonna stay here for a while? Are you enjoying this?
That's an interesting question. This has been. I don't know how much you know about the recent history of Keene State athletics. We're about to search for our fourth athletic director in 5 years.
Okay.
So we've had some interesting things go on in the last 4 or 5 years. I'm really enjoying working with Dr. Hendricks, our interim athletic director. I like her very much. I'm looking forward to seeing what this search will bring. As far as it goes for me personally, this is the longest I've stayed at any one job in the 12 years I've been out of college. I'm enjoying being back at my alma mater. My wife just got a job in this area. We have a 3-year-old son, and we're talking about having another child.
Oh, nice.
So family stability in a job that takes 60 hours a week is important. But you never know what the future holds. I certainly would be foolish if a job offer came my way that was in a place we wanted to live and that had all the financial ramifications. I would be foolish not to take a look at that.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
But am I happy here? Yeah, I would say I'm happy here.
Awesome.
I have advanced professionally in ways I did not expect or think I would when I took this job 5 years ago. So.
Well, awesome. This has been awesome to talk to you.
My pleasure.
And I always like to end the show on like a bit of a silly note,
Sure.
we'll say. I'm not I was never and will ever be a big political person, but there's a columnist out there who like does these man on the street interviews, and he asks these.
Jimmy Kimmel, right?
Yeah, Jimmy Kimmel does it. Jay Leno did it. I think there's a guy Jesse Waters I think does it. They all ask these simple questions, and people always get them wrong. So a little earlier today, I went out and asked some students some very simple American questions. And I just wanted to see what their answers would be. So we can take a look at that right now. Who was the second president? Who was the second president of the United States?
Abraham Lincoln? No? Okay, no clue.
John Adams.
That is just so sad.
What do flippers, the fire department, and the newspaper have to do with each other?
Not sure.
You all have to correlate to get things out. Do they all release news? Yeah.
No, they all had to do with Benjamin Franklin.
When do people make these decisions?
Thomas Paine wrote what? Common Sense. Thomas Paine wrote what?
Thomas Paine. I know this.
Thomas Paine wrote what?
I should know what is that. Shoot.
Common Sense.
You know, maybe there is no intelligent life out there in the universe after all.
Who bombed the United States in World War II? Correct. Where was that? Where did they bomb us? Pearl Harbor. Well done.
And?
Correct.
Yep.
Where was that? Where did they bomb us?
Pearl Harbor.
Correct.
There you go.
Who bombed the United States in World War II? That was Japan. Where did they bomb us?
Pearl Harbor.
There we go.
Who bombed the United States in World War II?
Japan.
Correct. Where was that?
I was on Pearl Harbor.
Pearl Harbor.
Yes!
The Korean War was the setting for what TV show? I don't know. The Korean War was the setting for what TV show? Correct. The Korean War was the setting for what TV show?
MASH.
Correct. The Korean War was the setting for what TV show?
MASH.
Yes! Well,
Thank you.
when was the Civil War fought?
1812? 1867?
1861 to 1864.
So close, 1861 to 1865. When it was being fought, what was the Korean War called?
Did you say no clue? I don't know.
It was a police action, if that's what you're looking for.
Correct!
It's about time.
When did the Korean War end?
68? I have no clue.
It actually never ended, they just had a ceasefire. It's still going on.
Yes, no, you're correct. Yep.
When did the Korean War end?
The Korean War ended in 19... I want to say... Technically it hasn't, so...
That's correct, it hasn't ended, that's right.
You see what you can do when you try.
So, you know, people don't ever answer the questions right, but there were a lot of them that did answer them right. Do you want to maybe take a
Oh,
crack
sure.
at it? All right, let's try it. Let's try it. Who was the second president of the United States?
Jeez. John Adams.
Yes. What do flippers, the fire department, and the newspaper have to do with each other?
I do not know.
They're all connected to Benjamin Franklin.
Ah.
He invented and then helped out with another one. Thomas Paine wrote what?
Do not know.
Common sense.
Okay.
Who bombed the United States in World War II?
The Japanese.
Yes. Where did they bomb us?
Pearl Harbor.
The Korean War was the setting for what TV show?
Oof. I do not know.
MASH.
Uh,
When was the Civil War fought?
1861 to 65.
Yes, correct. When it was being fought, what was the Korean War called?
When the Korean War was being fought? Okay, sorry, I thought that connection was
No,
that question was connected to the
No,
Civil
no,
War. When the Korean War was being fought, what was it called? I feel like I ought to know this, but I don't.
A police action.
Huh.
And when did the Korean War end?
Well, I've watched enough Mad Men to know that Roger Sterling supposedly fought in the Korean War, and that show is set in the 60s, so I'm going to guess in the 50s somewhere, because that would give it enough time between the start of Mad Men and the end of World War II.
It actually has never ended. There was a ceasefire in the 50s, but it's still going on.
Really?
Yeah.
I did not know that.
But you did very well. You did very well.
I like to think I know something about history.
Hey, that's okay.
Sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, again, thank you, Abe, so much for joining
My
us
pleasure.
today. And we'll have a lot more interviews coming at you in the further months to come. I'm Daniel Siletti, and this has been What's Going On. Thanks again.
Yeah, sure.